There's a quiet project underway to build the third temple. Among the preparations, there's talk of sacrificing 5 red heifers. People say the cornerstone could be laid at any moment. After years of expectation, a piece of news reignites the topic. A spotless red heifer may have been found. It sounds simple, but there's one point that changes the conversation, and that's where we'll start. Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube understands this content is relevant and shows it to more people. In Jewish tradition, the red heifer isn't some folktale detail. It's the sign of purification tied, since Numbers 19:122, to sacred duties. The ashes of the animal, burned completely and without defect, are used to purify those who will serve in the temple. That's why when people talk about rebuilding, they also talk about this rite. For many, it's a step ahead of the coming of the Messiah, the one who will bring peace, restore the order of Israel, and open the Messianic age. For centuries, though, the sacrifice was absent. Without the perfect heifer, there was no purification. Without purification, there was no temple. In recent years, organized searches have tried to fill that gap, checking every candidate carefully. Now, with quiet reports about one that meets the requirements, there's a growing sense that something is about to happen. What comes next and who's moving these pieces is what we're going to break down from here on. The red heifer is back in the spotlight for a clear reason. Its ashes, according to tradition, purify utensils and people before the temple is built. For many Jews, this step isn't a ritual detail, but the reactivation of ancient promises. It's as if a prophetic clock started ticking again, pointing to the possibility that the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem is getting closer, and with it the hope of the Messiah. Among Christians, the reading takes on a different emphasis. The same movement is linked to the expectation of the second coming of Christ. As the world watches this very rare rite unfold, the sense grows that the third temple and end times events might be connected. That's where the tension comes from. Different traditions, shared texts, interpretations that intersect and challenge each other. Whether this is just ancient history revived or a sign from heaven is the question hanging in the air. Are we seeing preparations for a return that would change everything? Or the beginning of a new religious and political chapter? Eyes turn to the altar, the ashes, the passages that speak of decisive days, while every move of the ritual seems to trigger new layers of expectation. And just when the path seemed open, one detail stalled the march. The approved heifer showed a minimal flaw, but one that matters to the priests: a single black hair. An almost invisible mark that reignites the debate, extends the wait, and raises another question. If even the smallest thing counts, what still has to happen before the temple gets off the drawing board? Signs, criteria, and timelines intertwine. And with each detour, the sense grows that something bigger is underway, calling for attention, caution, and stamina for what may come next. In Jewish tradition, the red heifer has to be flawless, whole from head to tail without a single hair of another color. It was a single black hair, almost invisible, that took it off the list of animals chosen for the official sacrifice. Even so, the priests didn't end the rite. They chose to hold a rehearsal ceremony, repeating every step prescribed by the law, even with a disqualified animal. It wasn't the final offering, but rigorous training so that when the time came, no one would hesitate and no detail would be missed. Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube knows this content matters and shows it to more people. What stands out is the care kept from start to finish. Measured gestures, purified tools, instructions checked, as if the altar were set for the ultimate sacrifice. And that raises questions. Why carry out a sacrifice knowing it doesn't meet all the requirements? For some, it's a statement of readiness. The community shows it's prepared even when the setting isn't ideal. For others, it's a technical test, proof that the process can handle setbacks, and that hands and eyes already know the way. Between the ideal and the real, the priests chose to learn. They refined procedures, found weak spots, adjusted timing and distances. Mistakes become a map. Rehearsal becomes discipline. Every repeated gesture etches into the body the rite that someday will need to be perfect. In this setup, the imperfect heifer takes on a strategic role. It doesn't bring purification, but it sets the stage, sharpens the collective memory, and keeps the tempo. If the flaw blocks the consecration, does it also block progress? Or does each practice step bring the goal closer? The role of the red heifer is just the start of a larger sequence. Its ashes, once obtained, purify, and at the same time mark the first concrete step on a path that takes shape little by little toward the construction of the third temple of Solomon. According to ancient prophecies, the temple is the place where the Jewish Messiah will arrive, fulfill God's promises, and restore Israel's honor. For centuries, that construction has fueled expectations. With the recent focus on the red heifer sacrifice, many feel the goal has never been so close. Even so, the gap between desire and deed is big. The road to the third temple is winding and full of historical and political layers. The central ground of the debate is the Temple Mount, now occupied by the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites. That overlap turns any initiative into a sensitive issue. Muslim communities call for preserving the sanctuary. Groups in Israel push to rebuild the temple right there. Every move around that plateau raises the temperature and can resonate far beyond Jerusalem. Faced with this stalemate, an alternative proposal emerges: move forward without touching the mosque. Some argue for building the temple at another spot, keeping the tradition alive through symbols and roots. Enter the Eastern Gate, the so-called Golden Gate, through which, according to Jewish belief, the Messiah will enter the city. The gate remains sealed, and the area around it serves as a Muslim cemetery. Even so, there are those who maintain that when the Messiah comes, material obstacles cease to exist, and the place becomes holy. One proposal tries to work around the gridlock: build the temple on the eastern side of the Temple Mount, next to the Golden Gate. That way it would avoid a direct clash with the mosque and lower the immediate risk. But would that fulfill the prophecy or just foreshadow something darker, beyond the control of any leadership? Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way YouTube knows this content matters and shows it to more people. For Christians, the Third Temple isn't just a historical or political topic. It ties into the hope of Christ's return. In Christian eschatology, rebuilding the temple is a sign that comes before the end times and sets the stage for the second coming. Texts like Revelation and other prophetic passages speak of a chain of events, including the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem and the activity of the Antichrist, who would sit there and declare himself God. That's why, for many believers, the third temple and the second coming are inseparable. While Jews await the Messiah who is to come, Christians say the Messiah has already come and will return to fulfill the rest of the prophecy. This meeting of expectations creates tension. Two traditions focused on the same place, reading the signs through different lenses and yet kept in sync by the prophetic clock. As ideas and preparations move forward in Jerusalem, global interest grows. News, speeches, and plans make up a changing scene. For those watching, it feels like the stage is being set for a decisive act, with pieces in place and the curtains about to open, but the next step still hasn't been taken. While part of the Jewish people keeps the expectation of the Messiah alive, the sense grows that ancient prophecies may intersect with the present. The Third Temple agenda no longer sounds far off. Groups are organizing, timelines are being drawn up, and politics has sped up a process that had been dormant. On this board, global leaders have started to influence the future of Jerusalem and its holy sites, touching symbols that echo beyond Israel. The emblematic example is Donald Trump. In the White House, he strengthened alignment with Israel and recognized Jerusalem as the capital, a decision that shook up alliances and reignited disputes in the Middle East. For movements that advocate for the temple, that backing sounds like a green light. When Trump says he's willing to help Israel in endeavors read as prophetic, questions arise. Is it just a defense of Israeli sovereignty, or part of a bigger storyline? The idea is gaining traction that figures with major political and financial clout could make the project feasible, consolidating influence on the Temple Mount and shifting the regional balance. And it's not a solo effort. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signaled that the red heifer sacrifice and the return to the temple hold a strategic place in his vision for the future. Amid diplomatic decisions, pressures, and religious expectations, the stage is being set and every statement becomes a thermometer. If agendas converge, the next steps could reshape the conversation about Jerusalem. When heads of state and influential voices in Israel speed up a project, the Middle East chessboard starts to shift. If the Third Temple gets off the drawing board, it won't be an issue confined to Jerusalem's walls. It'll be a turning point with ripple effects in politics, religion, and the power game. And one question cuts through cabinet meetings and street talk. By unlocking this process, would these leaders make room for the rise of someone even more powerful and dangerous? Before we go on, click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube knows this content matters and shows it to more people. For many Christians and Jews, the temple carries ancient promises. For Muslims, there's fear over a threat to one of Islam's holiest sites. That contrast points to a global response. Foreign ministries under pressure, international bodies rushing to meet, statements trying to contain the escalation. Consensus? None. The next step could be rough. Marches, clashes, sabotage attempts, and radical groups testing limits. The great powers will get pulled to the center of the board. Washington, Moscow, and European capitals will have to choose between defending the right to build in Israel or siding with those who reject the project. Every move reshuffles alliances, reopens regional disputes, and redraws red lines. And the fight isn't just about land. There's a spiritual piece that crosses borders. Billions of eyes turn to Jerusalem, tracking every announcement and every stone laid, as ancient prophecies return to the spotlight. For many, this moment will be seen as a decisive sign. For some, a warning of tribulation. For others, a confirmation of old promises. What's certain is that the waves from these events are already touching borders, markets, temples, and homes. Tensions rise, alliances wobble, rhetoric hardens. On this board, one question stands out. What move will the Antichrist make in the face of such deep changes? And how far will that take us? What's emerging sounds like the opening of a chapter talked about for centuries. The sacrifice of the red heifer is back at the center of the debate. The Third Temple reignites geopolitical disputes, and leaders from many nations take their positions, each with their own read of the moment. Everything points to a historic inflection point. But where do we, everyday people, fit in this timeline? Scripture calls for watchfulness and discernment. Building the Third Temple isn't just a religious topic or a power play. It's a spiritual marker that resets expectations. For Christians, it sounds like a call to reflect on Christ's return, remembering the prophetic clock hasn't stopped. Stronger faith, a life aligned with the Word, steadiness under pressure. That's the invitation. For Jews, it points to the fulfillment of prophecy, the hope of the Messiah's arrival, and the restoration of Israel. At this turning point, it's worth facing some direct questions. Are we ready? Do we grasp the weight of what's unfolding now? What in us needs to be adjusted for what's coming next? Now's the time to act. Seek understanding. Think through the meaning of these prophecies, and get your heart ready for what's approaching. As we adjust our course for changes already on the horizon, another question presses in. What's being woven behind the scenes? And how will each of us respond when the time comes? Signs so many have waited for are starting to converge. The sacrifice of the red heifer is back in the discussion. Geopolitical moves are reshaping alliances, and anticipation around the Third Temple is ticking like a speeding clock. For centuries, men and women of faith watched from a distance. Now the pieces are moving before our eyes, hinting at a picture bigger than we can take in. Before we go on, click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube knows this content matters and shows it to more people. The Third Temple is presented not just as a building, but as a prophetic milestone before the second coming of Christ. If these steps in Jerusalem pan out, the question takes on a new tone. Are we ready for what follows? The road ahead will likely demand vigilance, conflicts, decisions that test convictions, choices that reveal priorities. Even so, the call remains. Stay alert, keep going, and hold on to what matters. What comes next will shape generations. So this is also a time for pulling back, praying, and practical preparation. The first stone could be laid at any moment, and when it's set, the world will feel the impact. Until then, it's worth watching the signs, separating noise from meaning, and strengthening the faith that holds when history speeds up. Prophecy moves forward scene by scene, and the question that lingers is, will we be ready for the next chapter? The warning stands. Keep watch, pray, and pay attention to the signs. At the center of this storyline is the red heifer, not just as a purification rite, but as a concrete starting point for something bigger, a return to preparations for the third temple. The ashes are the ritual element. The next step is architectural and political. In Scripture, that temple is the stage where Israel's Messiah will fulfill ancient promises and restore the people's glory. For generations, that longing has crossed time, and the possibility of the sacrifice rekindles expectations. But the path isn't straight. The Temple Mount, the historical site of the sanctuary, is now home to Al-Aqsa Mosque, a sacred place for Islam. That overlap of memory and faith has become a long-standing impasse. Any move there echoes far beyond Jerusalem, and pressure to rebuild the temple on the same spot sparks tensions that easily spill across borders. Even so, the idea doesn't go away. Some argue the solution doesn't require removing the mosque, but could come through alternatives, nearby areas, phased projects, steps that move forward without an immediate rupture. Between prophetic expectations and today's realities, leaders and communities feel their way forward. Meanwhile, modern Sanhedrins, religious institutes, and diaspora groups fund research, revisit purity laws, train priests, and map out possible layouts. Legal experts debate jurisdictions, archaeologists disagree over digging limits, and diplomats tally the cost of every move. Small signs, permits, works, discoveries take on the weight of omens. The issue is no longer just theological. It's urban, geopolitical, and deeply human too. In Jerusalem, the Eastern Gate, the Golden Gate, holds a special place. Jewish tradition says the Messiah will enter through it. Today, the gate is sealed, and the area in front of it is a cemetery. For many Jews, that's no obstacle. When the Messiah comes, the place will become holy. From that comes a possible way out. Build the temple on the east side of the Temple Mount, near the Golden Gate, avoiding a direct clash with the mosque on the plateau. But would that be the answer the prophecies expect, or the start of something beyond human control? Before we go on, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. This tells YouTube the content is relevant and helps it reach more people. For Christians, the Third Temple has another dimension. It's not just history or politics, it's a sign of the end times. Rebuilding it would signal that the second coming of Jesus is getting closer. Passages in Revelation and other texts mention a sequence of events, including the rebuilding of the sanctuary and the presence of the Antichrist, who would sit there claiming divine authority. Out of this tension comes a bridge between two expectations. Part of the Jewish people awaits the Messiah who will come. Christians believe the Messiah has already come and will return to complete the final stage. The result is a shared vigil. Every move in Jerusalem carries weight. The scene is set, the pieces are moving. What remains to be seen is whether, when the next step is taken, the prophecies will converge, and where history will go from there. The debate over building the Third Temple is heating up again, and the involvement of political leaders adds another layer to an already sensitive ground. Global figures have started to directly influence the fate of Jerusalem and its holy sites, pulling the religious debate into the center of geopolitics. In this context, Donald Trump stands out. During his term, he recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and shored up alliances that increased Israel's weight on the international board, moves that also heightened regional tensions. His open support for Israel's right to build the Third Temple raises a question. Is this just a defense of Israeli sovereignty, or a step within a broader prophetic narrative? For some analysts, actors with political and economic clout, like Trump, could make the project possible and lock in new power dynamics around the Temple Mount. And it's not an isolated move. In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu often ties symbols like the red heifer sacrifice and the idea of the temple to the future his allies promote, turning religious themes into a government agenda. With Washington, Jerusalem, and other capitals projecting influence over every move, the board is being reshaped in real time. What sounds like a hypothesis today is starting to look like a real possibility, and each decision, each announcement, sets the stage for a turning point that could redirect the Middle East and, as a result, the world. And what if, without realizing it, these leaders are paving the way for someone even more powerful and more dangerous? The possible construction of the Third Temple wouldn't stay within Israel's borders. It would break through limits, rearranging the board of politics, religion, and geopolitics. Even now, the world is split. For many Christians and Jews, the temple carries deep historical and spiritual meaning. For Muslims, the project threatens one of their most sacred places. In this climate, the international community will have to respond, and every move will raise the temperature with a real risk of conflict taking shape. Before we continue, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. This tells YouTube the content is relevant and helps it reach more people. On the practical side, the initiative could spark protests, cause turmoil, and inflame pockets of violence, while extremist groups compete to push narratives and mark territory. Major powers, the US, Russia, and European countries, will face a strategic dilemma: endorse Israel's right to build the temple, or move closer to coalitions that reject the project. Each choice reshapes alliances, pressures markets, tests treaties, and redraws red lines. The Middle East's balance, already fragile, starts to depend on moves calculated down to the millimeter, with effects that go beyond the region and reach capitals around the world. There's also the spiritual dimension. Billions of people will turn their eyes to Jerusalem, interpreting signs through the lens of ancient prophecies. For some, a period of tribulation and global transformation begins. For others, a promise awaited for centuries is being fulfilled. In both cases, the domino effect crosses cultural and moral borders, resets agendas, and expands the reach of charismatic leaders. The uncomfortable question remains: who will capitalize on this fervor, and how far can this collective momentum go? As tensions rise and alliances wobble, one question hangs over every new development. What will the Antichrist's role be on this shifting board, and how will it end? The sense of a turning point grows where three lines meet: the debate over the red heifer sacrifice, the dispute around the Third Temple, and the actions of leaders shaping the global agenda. For centuries, sacred texts have talked about a cycle like this. Now the signs are piling up. Scripture tells us to watch, discern, and stay ready, not as a history lesson, but as guidance for right now. If the temple is rebuilt, it won't be just a religious or political event. It will be a spiritual milestone. For Christians, this move calls for reflection on the second coming of Christ, to stand firm in the faith and persevere in the Word. For Jews, it brings the fulfillment of promises closer, the hope of the Messiah, and the restoration of Israel. When these perspectives meet, it becomes clear this isn't an abstract debate. It's an inflection point that touches everyone. In this scenario, the issue stops being only geopolitical or theological and becomes personal. Are we paying attention to the signs? Have we strengthened our hearts for challenging days? Are we seeking understanding with humility and courage? The time for passivity is over. This is the moment to learn, examine our own faith, and prepare the way. Because every day the pieces line up and history moves toward its next act. As we get ready for large-scale change, another question presses in. What's moving behind the scenes? And how will each of us respond when the time comes? The clock is ticking. The debate over the red heifer sacrifice, the geopolitical tensions, and the growing attention on the Third Temple have the world on alert. For generations, many watched these prophecies from a distance. Now the pieces seem to be lining up right in front of us, suggesting a turning point. The Third Temple isn't just stone and structure. For millions, it represents the outcome of ancient promises and a sign that by faith precedes Christ's return. As new steps take shape in Jerusalem, a question that can't be put off comes up. Are we ready for the effects this could bring? The path ahead involves firm choices, conflicts, and sacrifices. Even so, the call remains the same. Keep watch, stay faithful, and keep your heart alert. This is also a time for inner examination, prayer, and practical preparation. The first stone could be laid at any moment, and when that happens, nothing will be the same. As prophecy takes on sharper outlines, it's up to each of us to discern the next step. How to adjust priorities, how to protect the family, how to sustain hope when the pressure rises. The situation is changing fast. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If this message spoke to you, stay alert. In the next video, we'll dig deeper into the lesser discussed signs and what to do when the news breaks. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment about how you're getting ready. Your experience can strengthen others. Until then, keep your eyes open, your heart in prayer, and your steps steady. Peace, and see you soon.